Hello, boys and girls, and happy Thursday, May 21st. It's the second to last day of school. No. I continue to be impressed by your passion projects. They are so much fun to watch. It's been great to view them with each other during our small group meetings. I love it. Declan is our superstar today, so thank you to Declan for sharing with us a video. And today, or yesterday during your writing session, you got to write about today during your writing session, you are writing about your favorite things of first grade. So your favorite movie, subject, this will be a fun thing to put into your memory book that will be given to you next week. All right, we're going to get started on the last chapter of our read aloud here and find out what's going on with Goonie Bird. Goonie Bird looked around the classroom. She slid the strap of her cowhide purse from her shoulder and set the purse on the floor below the terrarium table. The terrarium table is right there. Terrarium table is where you put an animal or a pet. With her face scrunched into a quiet, thinking expression, she unbuttoned her orange fur jacket and hung it on the back of the chair by her desk. Then she returned to the front of the room and faced the class. She was wearing a blue plaid skirt, a white blouse, black tights, and brown lace-up shoes. There were bright blue hair ribbons in her neatly brushed red hair. She looked ordinary. She looked dignified. She looked wise. Out there, invisible, are a lot of stories not yet told, Goonie Bird told the class. Absolutely true ones? Beanie asked in a small voice. Yes, absolutely true ones. What are they? Asked Beanie. Do you remember that my first story was called How Goonie Bird Got Her Name? Goonie Bird asked. Yes, Beanie replied. Well, another is called How Beanie Got Her Name. Before I was born, Beanie said, laughing, there was a thing called an ultrasound that showed me curled up inside my mom, and I looked like a bean. My mom said, lima bean, and my daddy said, no, jelly bean. And so, that's a fine story beginning, Goonie Bird said, an absolutely true one. You should tell that one on Friday, Beanie. What other invisible stories are out there? Mrs. Pigeon asked. Do you remember that my second story was about how I came from China on a flying carpet? Oh my, yes, Mrs. Pigeon said. I had to look up China in the atlas. Out there, invisible and waiting, Goonie Bird said, is a story called Let Me Think. She closed her eyes. Is that the title? Let me think? Malcolm asked. No, Goonie Bird opened her eyes. The story is called How Kiko's Family Came to Water Tower. Kiko smiled. Well, they started out on a ship, she said. First, my grandmother and grandfather got a big ship in Yokohama and went to Honolulu. They were a little scared because they had never, ever been to America before. Mrs. Pigeon, you should get the atlas out. Mrs. Pigeon smiled. I will. When you tell your story, Kiko, maybe next Wednesday? Okay, Kiko said, and I'll bring some pictures. And how about if I wear a kimono? That won't be distracting, like whiskers, would it? It would be lovely, Goonie Bird said, and I could maybe carry a fan and a parasol. Goonie Bird said gently, that would be a little like whiskers, Kiko. Overdoing it? Kiko asked. Overdoing it, Goonie Bird said. What about me? Asked Barry. Do I have a story? Of course you do, Goonie Bird told him. You have stories called How Barry Got His Name and How Barry's Family Came to Water Tower and lots of others. Barry grinned. Which one should I tell? He asked. Do you remember that my third story was all about diamond earrings? Barry nodded. My suggestion, when it's your turn, Barry, you should tell an absolutely true story called When Barry Spent Every Penny He Had on Something He Really Wanted Badly. The class waited and watched Barry Tuckerman as he squinched his face up thinking, and he grinned. Okay, he said, I'll tell it, but it's really, really gross. Oh no, said Kiko, I hate gross. You can cover your ears for Barry's story, Goonie Bird told her. Wear earmuffs that day. Green would go nicely with your red sweater, I think. Who else? What else? The class called. My fourth story was called How Goonie Bird Directed an Orchestra. Mrs. Pigeon suggested. Maybe we could skip that one, Goonie Bird. I know no one in the class has ever led an orchestra before. Class? Goonie Bird asked. Has anyone ever happened to be late to school because something quite unusual happened? Almost every hand went up. Malcolm, Goonybird said, maybe that story could be your assignment. It could be called While Malcolm Was Late to School. It could be about the time I slept under my bed and my mother couldn't find me in the morning, Malcolm said, or the time that I dropped my toothbrush in the toilet, or when I had to get back, Oh no, Kiko cried and covered her ears. Don't tell it now and give it away, Malcolm, Goonybird said. You work on your story and make it suspenseful and add the word suddenly in the middle. Suddenly is a transition word. I love how Goonybird is teaching us about how to write good stories. Goonybird looked around the classroom. All the second graders had taken out paper and pencils. They were all writing down ideas for their story. And remember my last story about Catman? She remembered. Has anyone ever lost a beloved pet? Almost every hand went up again, including Mrs. Pigeon's. Could that be my story, Goonybird? Mrs. Pigeon said. I had a parakeet named Brucey, and somehow the door to his cage was left open. And next Tuesday, Goonybird said, How I Lost Brucey. And found him again, Mrs. Pigeon said with a happy smile. My story has a surprise ending. You know what, Mrs. Pigeon said, standing up? It's lunchtime already. Let's skip math class today. The students put their math books away in their desk. They reached for their lunch boxes instead. Goonybird took out a grapefruit, a cucumber, and some dill pickles. I'm having a completely vegetarian day today, she explained. But look at this, dessert for the whole class. She held up a bulky paper bag. What is it? The children asked. Goonybird grinned. I have 63 gumballs, she said, and after I give them out, I am going to teach you all a wonderful, whirling, swirling dance called the tarantula. Suddenly, Felicia Ann looked up from the floor. Shouldn't we all hug and kiss first? She said in a surprisingly loud voice. Thank you for suggesting that, Felicia Ann, Goonybird said. Of course we should. And so they did. The end. Goonybird sure is inspiring a lot of people in the class to write stories and tell stories. She is such a good leader. They hugged each other at the end. I wish I could hug all of you. One big group hug on the last day of school. We will not get to group hug on the last day of school, but we will group hug next year when we're allowed to touch. Maybe 2 years when we're allowed to touch. I'm not really sure, but it'll happen because my favorite things is hugs from students. I hope you enjoyed Goonybird's crazy story. I hope that you were inspired to someday write a silly story like Goonybird did and use suspense like she did. Maybe use the transition word suddenly like she does in her stories. All right, tomorrow we will have a special read aloud during our Zoom meeting, and I will hand out award certificates to you. Have a wonderful Thursday, boys and girls, and we will see you tomorrow for the last day of school.